a joint partnership interview. I'm on the board of Fostering Joy. I also own a business named Storybee, in which we tell people stories. So it's kind of like perfect little scenario for it to be a joint partnership here. So I was reading up on your story. I read a little bit about it, but I didn't want to read too much because I'd rather hear it from y'all. Of course, just first tell us who you are, and then you can answer the question. Can you share some of the pivotal moments in your journey that have shaped who you are today?
Well, I'm Travis Creasy, and along with my wife Whitney, and some of the pivotal moments in my journey would be just the people that you run into along the way, whether that is preparing you for the fostering journey, that type of thing, meeting people who unconditionally love the people around them, regardless. I come from a big family. My mom has 10 brothers and sisters. My dad has 11. And so all my cousins were basically like close family. And a lot of them are brothers and sisters in my mind, although that's not necessarily how we are related. But getting to know them, growing up, learning how to share, having people around all the time that, it's kind of interesting because Whitney, when we got married, she'd come to a family reunion and she'd be like, who are all these people? And to some degree, I'd be like, I'm not sure who all belongs to who, but it didn't matter because, we treated them the same either way. And whether it was officially adopting someone or just, hey, you're around and we want to treat you a good way. And, you're part of the family as long as you're here, however all that works. And so I've just kind of always had that background that, if you're here, we're going to treat you well. I'm going to treat you like family. And maybe that's a Southern thing. I don't know. Certainly a church thing. But having an older brother who has cerebral palsy and seeing that struggle and the things that he dealt with growing up and if that guy can have a smile on his face, then obviously there's not a whole lot out there that's not insurmountable, especially as people of faith, seeing God do the impossible, not only in his word, but among the people that you spend time around. And so those are definitely pivotal moments. And then, of course, the time Whitney comes and goes, hey, I think the Lord is calling us to be foster parents. And of course, me being stubborn going, no, he's not.
We'll just derail from the question a little bit. What sparked that journey? For us, we had like 10 years of infertility and, all these seemingly roadblocks, and God was kind of nudging us towards foster care. What was it for you guys?
Well, I'll say I guess I had like a crisis of faith, is maybe what I would call it. I was turning 30 and I was like thinking, I don't really ever, because what we do, we work for a private Christian school with Kara, and Travis is a preacher. And so I was thinking, like, I just don't really ever have much interaction with people who don't already have the chance to know Jesus, because the people who I interact with on a daily, constant basis are either here at Riverside, at school, or at church with us, and that fills up all of our time. And I felt like that was a problem, and so I was praying about that. And I can remember I was just like out on a run one day, and I was praying about, like, God, what do you want us to do? Like, I feel like we're really busy doing things in the kingdom, but it's not like it's all around people who already have the opportunity to know you. And anyway, foster care came up in my mind, and I was like, well, that's crazy. To start with, I was, but it just kept coming up, not just like I would think about it, but random people would mention it to me as something that we should do. And they would not be people who I had said anything to about it. I never really said anything to anyone about it. And these people just started coming one by one who didn't even know each other necessarily and saying things to me about doing foster care. And then I started like actually seeing billboards on the side of the road that were recruiting foster parents, and hearing like radio ads that were recruiting foster parents. And so
Specifically
finally,
Nick Saban
right.
ads, right?
Yeah. It was during the middle of football season. And so I would listen to the Alabama games on the radio a lot. And Nick Saban had ads that year where he was recruiting foster parents. And so that was really, it felt like confirmation that what I was hearing in prayer was what the Lord was saying. So anyway, that was how it all started for us.
I'm going to skip the pre-written questions for now. I'm just going to go with my gut here.
Okay.
What have been some of the most challenging, what were your did you have any preconceptions jumping into foster care? Has it been more difficult than you thought, less difficult? And like, what have been some of the pleasant surprises, I guess?
You want to start? Or
I think, as most things with me, I don't really know. I'm kind of gullible when it comes to things like that. And so, but once we're gung ho, it's like, hey, well, this is what we're doing. This is the way we're moving. And so we'll roll with the punches. And so I think one of the things that kind of caught me by surprise when we started taking the classes was it was just as much about the parents of these kids as it was them. And, they're really trying to push you to not only bring the kids along, but also mentor these parents. And certainly the biological parents of the two that we have did need a lot of mentoring. They did need a lot of help. And so that was something I kind of wasn't necessarily prepared for per se, but it also makes sense because when we first got in, obviously the goal is to reunite, reunification. And we were certainly on board with that. It wasn't like we were really doing it to necessarily adopt, although we were open to that, I think, from the beginning. Mm-hmm. But, so much of the training, so much of the class was, this is how we kind of bridge the gap. It was about the kids, but also being open to helping these. And they were kids. I mean, in comparison to us, age-wise, they were kids. And so I guess that was kind of the thing that I didn't really think about going in, that you'd have an opportunity to not only impact the kiddos, but the family as a whole. And then realizing that, this is a legacy changer. That a lot of the parents of the kids in foster care were in foster care themselves, which is, a difficult thing because they're all suspicious of foster parents one way or the other. Like either they're trying to take my kid, or I've been through this process and I've had a bad experience. And so you're really on all sides dealing with bad experiences, because people are people and we all make mistakes. And, I know that we weren't perfect, and perfection. That's one of the great things about one of the ads I think out now is like, they're not looking for perfect people because there aren't any. Just being present, being available is such a huge first step of it. Like, how can I be available? Whether it's I'm going to be a full-time foster parent, or I'm going to offer a weekend getaway, or whatever that may be, just being a part of it is such a huge thing. And certainly we came to the understanding through my leukemia battle and all that stuff, how important it was to have people around you that could take the kids for a little while, or, do this service that isn't really with the kids or doesn't feel like you're directly impacting them, but you are. So, finding places to meet with the parents. I know that was hard to do because parks are great unless it's raining or snowing, and then you've got to find places. And so people that would provide that, or churches that would provide that, were just a big, huge deal. And those are all things that we really didn't think about when you really start getting into it. So that would be my take on that question. I'm sure Whitney's got some other perspective.
I think we all knew that it would be hard going into it, and you expect that, but I think that it's really, really difficult to understand just how hard it will be and how it's physically taxing, but it's also really emotionally and spiritually taxing. I think for everyone involved. But one of the things that I feel like was difficult for me was I couldn't, like, being with the kids every day. It was hard for me to see their progress, because you're there each and every day, and it feels like you fight for every inch of progress that you get in every area. And everybody else could kind of see that, who wasn't as close to the situation as I was, and they could see it a lot better than I could. And so I really I had to rely on other people to help me see and remind me of the progress that was being made, because it just does feel very slow, and it feels like you are putting in so much of yourself and so much effort and just giving it everything that you have, and you don't feel like you're doing anything at sometimes.
I know you touched on the leukemia story and things like that, but can you kind of give a snapshot of that, because that also ties into Adoption Day as well, right? Can you just tell that story?
So I was diagnosed in October of 18, and we went to the oncologist. I mentioned I was gullible, right? And so I didn't really quite realize cancer was necessarily on the table. And then, of course, we're fostering, and the doctor basically is like, we're going to put you in the hospital, and you need to think weeks, not days. And the hospital is in Alabama, and all of our family lives in Alabama. We're right at the Tennessee state line. And of course, our kids were from the state of Tennessee. And so it's interesting, on the way to the hospital to be admitted, we're both thinking about the kids, like what's going to happen to the kids, because our family that could stay with them, they would have to go to Alabama. They weren't state certified through Tennessee to be foster parents. And so your mind immediately goes to, we're going to lose the kids. And this, actually, it might be best for them instead of going through all this. And, we had some great people working with us, and thankfully it got worked out to where they could either go to Alabama, or, they kind of passed our family through pretty quickly to get approved to stay with the kids. And so, that kind of works out, but it's a whole nother level of, your blood is trying to kill you through leukemia, but there's also this whole other 2 kids whose lives have already been thrown up in the air, and now this. And it's one of those things where you're really, as fast paced as my life is, it was one of those moments where it's like, you're going to have to slow down now. Like, there aren't any way to really speed this up. You're just going to have to, day by day, take it as it comes. And that's not easy for me anyway, like I say that.
Yeah. And Whitney, what did, from your side, what was it like for you as, I guess, the foster mom and just navigating all that?
Oh, I had, for months leading up to this point, been really concerned about some stuff that was happening with the kids and their case and how it was all being handled. And I just had a lot of anxiety about it. And I had done all the things that, I felt like I could possibly do to advocate for them. And it was just on my mind all the time. It's all I thought about. It was always there, kind of at the forefront of my mind. And just, kind of constantly running scenarios in my brain of, well, if this, then that. And when he was diagnosed and we realized, I was, again, neither one of us really expected that the news was going to be cancer. In fact, I was thinking that we were going to be back for the JV football game that he was supposed to coach that night. And, he never came home until like 5 weeks later. from that doctor's appointment. So I wasn't thinking about that at all. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like you hit this brick wall, and the thing that had been forefront of your mind, that you'd just been running all these scenarios in your head over and constantly making sure that you've done everything that you can do to make sure that this situation works out well for those children that you've grown to love. And all of a sudden that was like, I knew that I couldn't do that anymore. Like I finally, talking about truly surrendering something, like I was saying, I would say that I had surrendered that, and that, whatever God's will was for that, I was good with it. But I had not, because I was still just constantly thinking about it and doing and talking to their case manager and all of that. And when this hit, I remember sitting there in the hospital room that night, and there's just alarms going off, and I remember just like telling God, I can't do both of the things, so I've got to let this other one go, and I'm truly just got to trust that you have it, because I've done what I can do, and I've got to be done with that over there, because Travis needs me in this way and in this situation. And I just like felt like I heard him say, well, it's about time, and I've got it, and then I looked up, and there was this picture on the door in the hospital room from one of the students here at school, where she had written, like in calligraphy, Exodus, I think it's 14:14, or it says, "Be still, the Lord will fight for you." And I was like, okay, that's exactly what I've got to do right here. It was, I got to be still. I can't do all of that anymore, and I just have to know that he's gonna fight.
Yeah, and there's this common misconception, like, that God won't give you more than you can handle. It's not true.
Right.
God will give you more than you can handle, so that you can lean on Him when the stuff hits the fan.
Yeah, I don't sing the Toby Mac song, "Take Me to the Place Where I Know I Need You." I've been there. I got that T-shirt, so I'm not singing anymore. If the Lord wants to do it, that's His will, but I'm not asking for it. And I'll just, once again, selfish, I'll just say that. But I don't sing that song anymore.
I've come to realize that our story, like, I didn't jump into it so that, our friends and family could watch our story from a distance or anything like that. But as time progressed, like, I started realizing for us and our foster journey that that people were watching us. How has that been for you guys? Because there's also the family mix element too, and family doesn't know what to expect either. How do you feel about that? Is it easy to ignore, and you just focus on being good parents, or like what's that like for you guys?
I'll say we had no other kids before, and so we went from 0 to 2. I don't know that I would advise that per se, but 0 to 2, and I remember going to these meetings with the state workers, and they'd be like, "Man, y'all are really good at this. Y'all are like some of our best parents." And I remember getting in the car and looking at Whitney going, I would hate to see those other people, because it just felt like we were getting whooped on every side, to be honest. And I don't know what we would do. I don't know how people do it without a church family. And we are obviously kind of a different dynamic with a church and a school. And so we just had a tremendous village to help us do it, and to encourage us and help us. And so it's interesting. We've had them for 8 years, just the other day, Easter or whatever it was, 8 years. And, to some people, our family, they're always going to be those little foster kids, in a good way. And so it's almost combative to like keep them from being spoiled and having everything that they want, because everybody still sees them as those kids that showed up at our house 8 years ago and didn't have anything. And so there's always this willingness to give. But just like any person with any kid, sometimes they have a lot of grandparents that aren't necessarily officially grandparents, but certainly spoil them like they are. And so there's even that balance of, well, no, they're not, they're different. They've grown up. They've got, hold them accountable, discipline them just like you would any other kid. But man, like I said, I don't think it would have worked out the way it worked out if we didn't have the support group and the people who were there to help us and encourage us and mentor us, and that we'd had seen people model parenting in such a great way. Now there's also that part of, I thought I was a selfless person until those two kids came and they showed me, not on purpose, but they showed me, they kind of held up a mirror to me and showed me really how selfish I was. And so there was that whole learning process. And boy, I sure appreciate my parents now, because I realize they were growing up too. And so I have a new respect for them, and understanding that, when I thought all parents were supposed to have it all together. And man, it's been a realization to me, like, I was growing up, there's a lot of gray in this beard, and maybe some of it's because I teach kids or have kids of my own, but they taught me so much about me and where I'm impatient and where I've always thought that I should have it my way, even though I thought I was pretty selfless. But I've seen some selfless people come alongside us for sure.
And I would say same, Joe, we didn't really go into it for our life and our story to become something that is a part of everybody else's story and lives. But that's really what ended up happening, especially in the midst of our fostering journey, because Travis was diagnosed with leukemia like exactly a year and a half into our fostering journey. And we already had so many people in our community that were praying for our two kids that we were fostering, and praying for their parents and for the whole situation, that whatever happened would turn out well. And then Travis was diagnosed with leukemia in the midst of that. And then it just became, we just live in this place that has just been so good to us, and has just, everybody just wrapped their arms around us, and people prayed like I've just never experienced the feeling of that many people praying for me and my family. And in the middle of that, I was just overwhelmed by how many people felt like, you could tell that they were praying and interceding in a way that they felt like our story was their story. And, even the day that the kids were adopted, we invited everybody who wanted to come to the adoption ceremony at the courthouse. And I think that we had more in there than the fire marshal would have allowed. But it hit me. It hit me that afternoon. We had their ceremony, and we went from there to our house, and we just had some like cake and punch and stuff like that. And kids had a big inflatable water slide and had a little celebration and a party. And when we did that, I can remember so many people telling me, especially one of the ladies that went to church with us, whose husband had passed away in the meantime. But I just remember her saying that her husband had just prayed for us every day, and that she just felt like this was his victory.
Yeah, and you don't realize how big that network is until
Yeah.
it was the same thing for us. Like, we looked up at the Zoom screen and it was completely filled, and then it was cycling through the next set of people, and it's just overwhelming. And to see how God is using your story, even when you're not really that aware of it, because you're just in the midst of it.
Yeah.
Trying to get through the next 10 seconds.
Yeah, honestly, you're just being a parent. I mean, you jump in, you think it's going to be weird, and then they walk in the door and boom, parent mode, and it never turns off. So
it was definitely a process and journey, because it was it was difficult. There were, for several months, we were praying heartily that they would go back to their parents. And I'll say, as selfless as that sounds, it was pretty selfish, like, whoa, this is really difficult. And we want this. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's like, we can't even think of having life without these kids. And I really do credit the Lord for that, for really warming our hearts to being open. Of course, when we got in, we were open to adoption if that's what the Lord saw fit. But there were certainly those times where it was like, man, I really wish their parents would get their life together, because, man, this is just, it's beating us up. Really asking the Lord, change our heart for not only the parents, but the kids. And he certainly did that. And, to me, that was just a really God thing,
Yeah, it really is an emotional roller coaster. And, the longer they're with you, the more they feel like they're yours. And, until adoption day, it's never truly official. So it's kind of a big tease, because, here's the thing you've always waited for. And, it doesn't, you might not truly feel like it's going to happen until it happens. Ariel, you're now in, you can tell everyone who you are.
Hey.
If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, no, this has been an awesome story, and thank you guys for sharing.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Incredible. Yeah, lucky to get to interact with so many great people. But I guess for you guys, if you were meeting people who were just starting a journey to potentially foster, like, what would you share, and maybe what would your encouragement be?
What would you say?
I would say it's definitely you're going to make an impact. You're going to be changed, and you're going to be changed for the better overall. Like I said, I've learned so much about myself, but I've also become a much more compassionate person. I'm much more understanding of people and their limitations, and things happen. And so my encouragement to them is, it's difficult, but it's a difficult that's worth it.
Yeah.
I've done some difficult things at the end where I was like, that made zero difference, and I just made my life harder. And we've also had a few other, through the state, come to our house for a shorter period of time where we just provided a place for them. And even in that, even in those, a 24-hour turnaround with some older children, who were already calling me dad before they left, which, that tears your heart out, because obviously they've not had someone that filled that role in that way.
Right.
And even as you watch them leave with all kinds of stuff in their arms, because you just give it away, just take it. You're making an impact. And I know there are people who do it, and that's all they provide is a weekend. Like, I can give you 48 hours to come stay at our place till you find something better. And that is such a needed thing, even if that's all you plan on doing. But I will say, if it's like Tennessee, you can say that's all you're going to do, and they're there to advocate for those kids, and they're going to try their best to get you to keep them longer. But that's their job, and they're advocating for those kids. And so even in that, but I mean, it is a journey, and I've learned so much about my limitations and so much about my faith. And certainly there's at no point where you're like, this isn't accomplishing something.
Right.
They doubt for a few seconds or a few minutes, but we had great people in our life who are like, oh no, we can see the difference that you're making for these kids and impact. And you need those people. So if you see that out there, maybe you don't have foster kids out there and you're listening to this, but somebody who does, they need to hear the difference that they're seeing or that they're making in a person's life. So,
and I would say build your village that is going to support you in all the ways, because that was, I just think that was so necessary for
and
us.
have people like that you
especially for you guys. Yeah.
Honest with. I had a cousin, I have a cousin, he has 5 kids of his own. And there were times where I reached out to his wisdom, like, hey man, I mean, even the night they came to us, what do you feed these kids? They're this age. What's something what all do we need? And so Whitney's dead on with a village. And like I said, people you can be honest with, hey, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling burnout. I'm feeling like I'm not making a difference.
Yeah, that's amazing. Hey, I want to ask one other question. And okay, I was making sure Joe didn't shake his head no at me. But for you two, and if this is too much, just skip the question. It's totally fine. But Travis, you were kind of talking about like, and it didn't always feel like I was prepared, knew what I was doing. Can you maybe talk about from the kids' perspective? Because I feel like it's not just for fostering, but as parents, like, oh my goodness, I'm trying to be so good, but I mess up sometimes too. And can you guys speak for the kids that you have had in your home, any of them, and just the impact that you two have had on them, despite what's going on in your head, right? You're like, oh my goodness, I feel like I failed or I messed that up, but just for them and the impact maybe that you've had.
Well, just for that, learning to be honest. The temptation is to project, and I'm a preacher and I teach teenagers, and the temptation is to project that you've got it all together. And really, probably the most impact I've had being a parent or a teacher or a coach or a preacher is the saying, hey, I'm sorry. I blew that. I botched that. This was what I wanted to happen. This is how it went. And just being careful of what I would say, if I can say this, the Clark Griswold, like, oh, we're going to do this thing and it's going to be perfect. It's going to be like the Disney happy ending, and it's going to be, and you just realize you've just added more souls to the equation and more ways in which it can go wrong. And so, giving yourself credit for the attempt and not beating yourself up too much when it's doesn't turn out the way you want it to, and also being willing to just say, hey, I'm sorry, I messed that up. And they came to us at 1 and 2, and they might not have understood a thing I was saying, but it felt good to be real and honest and just go, I'm sorry, Dad shouldn't have said that. Dad shouldn't have done that. Dad really wanted it to go this way, but unfortunately it went this way. And so one of the best things one of my buddies told me in the parenting before we got started was just be honest with them. Be honest with them as much as they can understand. Just be honest with them. And eventually one day they'll appreciate that if they don't in the moment. So.
Yeah.
And I would say one of the ways where I think that I saw a complete shift in both of our kids is their ability to get to know people and to trust people. When they first came to us, again, they were really young. They were 1 and 2, but our daughter didn't trust anyone. And in fact, when that first week when you have foster children in your home, there's lots of people that come to your home and knock on your door and come in. You have case managers, and we had people who were coming in and assessing them for developmental delays, and it's just,
that's not counting the trips that you had to make somewhere else.
Right. And so every time somebody new would knock on our door, she would just she would just scream, and it would carry on for like 2 hours, and she'd wrap herself around my leg, and you don't know what they had experienced or what they had been through. And so we could tell that she didn't trust anyone but me to start with. And so that was a big burden, but also, it was really painful for her because we were constantly going places and seeing new people, and she was terrified. It was even to the point where I started telling anyone who was coming to our house, hey, if I already knew the person, I would show her a picture on my phone of that person and say, hey, this is my friend so-and-so, and they're going to come to see us in a little while. And I would say why they were coming to see us, and I would tell that person, bring her something. If it's a sucker, if it's a balloon, just bring her something.
Bubbles.
And bubbles, that was a big thing. Anything yellow, yes. And I would tell her, and they're going to bring you something, and so, and that that
which can set a bad precedent. But
it could, but that at least kept her from being terrified and got her to where she would look forward to a visitor coming to see her. But I remember probably like 3 or 4 months in to them being with us. It was just me and her, and I took her somewhere, and we got out of the car, and there was a lady getting out of her car next to us in the parking lot, and the lady looked at her and said something about how pretty her outfit was, or her hair bow, or something. It was something like that. I think it was the outfit. And Haley, when I got her out of the car seat and sat her down and turned around to get my purse, I looked back, and Haley had run over to this lady and just hugged her around her legs. And it was a complete stranger just in the parking lot. We'd never seen this lady before. And I was like, that was one of those light bulb moments for me where it was like, oh, we have done something here. Like we have done something good. We have shown.
now you got to be
her,
careful, because she'll just run off with anybody.
Yeah. Now we're a little bit the opposite, you know.
She's never met a
She's
stranger.
she's very social. She's never met a stranger. She would go with anybody. But at first it was like she didn't trust anyone.
Whitney was so intentional about everything. And I'll say I'm not that person, but she was. And it paid off so much for those kids, just the structure. You know, she was every detail, like trying to think of ways to kind of break the ice for these kids. And, you know, I'm just kind of, hey, I'll show up and try to keep them from burning the house down. And, you know, she's like, no, this is what we're going to do here, and this is why. And it was just awesome to watch and see. And, you know, I truly was just available. So
That's amazing. Well, thank you guys for sharing that and being so vulnerable.
Yeah, thank you. And there's also, there's the ministry aspect with the kids. You want them to, you know, you want to have the shared household faith, but there's also the dynamics with all that with the parents as well. And I always found that there's this unwritten ministry with the parents and how you treat them as well.
And I think if you went in knowing that, that would just be a game changer. You know, and we got to know the parents a little bit. We've talked to them a good bit on occasion, but I mean, we really haven't had an opportunity to do as much of it as we'd like to, just for other reasons. But, you know, we've always been kind of open. And even recently, Haley has been asking questions. And of course, y'all know that's a whole different, that may be a whole different podcast in the future to do, but that's been kind of interesting. But the fact that they feel comfortable coming to us was the goal. Like, come to us with your questions. We want to answer them. We're not trying to withhold information from you. And that's been intentional. Like, we want you to feel like we're always going to be honest with you, even if it's not as fun as some of the other kids may be having fun. We want to be honest with you, and that you never question that we're going to tell you the truth, you know, that you're able to handle at the time, of course. And so that's a whole nother ball game.
Cara, I know you're in the room too. Is there any questions you want to ask him?
Oh boy.
I know you didn't think I'd ask you.
No. I mean, I feel like I've been on part of the journey with them, but just how much did the church help you? Because I feel like I know the school side okay, but the church family, how did they actually help? Because I know the Coopers and everybody.
Right. Like, our church family was there for so much. I mean, through all of it, from just at the very beginning, you know, we were both working, and I didn't realize, I had no idea how difficult it was to get daycare. If I had known that, I wouldn't have taken a 1 and a 2-year-old. Like, when they called and said, we have a 1 and a 2-year-old, if I had understood that we would go a few months with no daycare, I would have been like, oh, well, there's no way I can take a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old and not have any daycare. But I didn't know that. And I said, yes. And And then it was like, well, you're just out of luck. There's no daycare, and there's no daycare for your children to be in. And so we still had like, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks left of school at that point for the school year. And we had ladies from church that kept them every day of the week for free until we got out of school and until, we got daycare for them. And so that was huge. And
we're talking like an 80-member congregation, if that. And I think one of the best moves we made is we were open and honest with the church from the moment the journey started. And when we started thinking about it, it was like we were telling people in church, like, we're thinking about doing this, and if we do it, we're going to need y'all's help. We're going to need your help. And they were all gung ho and were willing to do whatever. And to me, church that size, doing all of what she just said, along with a lot of other things, is a big commitment, and showed their love for us, obviously. And they just treat these kids like they're their own. And I pretty much gave them permission to do that, especially after they were adopted.
Yeah.
Like, hey, don't hold back. Expect out of them what you'd expect anyone else.
That
Even
is
like, I know in the summer when he would be gone for a week or so at a time, some of the people from church would just come over and bring dinner one night, so I wouldn't have to do all the things all day, and they would come over and bring dinner and play with the kids, and
they were actually with
help
one
me do
of
the
our
bedtime routine.
one of
and all
our
that.
elders when I got diagnosed. That's who
Yeah.
they were staying with, and that's a really awesome thing that they were there with them and could pray and in that moment. So that's the village, the church was just a big deal. And I would call them from the hospital room and do a little 5-minute sermonette, and it's just really good, They didn't go through the training with us, but they were all gung ho and willing to do and serve in whatever capacity they could. So
yeah, at some point one of my friends told me, don't rob other people of the opportunity to serve. You might be drowning, and hopefully it doesn't get to the point where like you're just looking for a life raft, but you're actually allowing other people to join in the story.
And thank you for having us. It was good. I enjoyed getting to speak with other people who are involved in the ministry of foster care, and I love what you're doing, Ariel. I've heard all kinds of good things from Kara about.
I think she's pretty biased, but I appreciate that.
Ariel is pretty humble. She's been our daughter's mentor for years since we got into foster care.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and then when she wanted to start this nonprofit, she's like, well, I wonder if I know any foster guys. Oh yeah, there's Joe.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, I would just encourage anybody listening to this that's in it, just keep going. It's, I can speak to times where I think of my son was not asleep. He did not sleep for the first month, and we were doing all the parent things, like rocking him, all that stuff, and it ended up he just wanted to be by himself. We put him in our room. We slept in the basement, and he slept like a charm. And it's like, that's not how it's supposed to work, but that's exactly how it works. And he sleeps still to this day, by himself and like a charm. And so, you're thinking we're messing up. We're doing all the wrong, terrible, bad things, but really you're trying. And what those kids need is somebody who's trying. And when you try, you're going to fail. It's just going to happen, or you're going to mess up. But it's the trying that matters, and they will pick up on it, and ours aren't teenagers yet. Our daughter does think she knows everything. She does think that. But just don't give up. However you're parenting, just keep on trying.
Can you tell anyone who's listening, can you just kind of talk to us about your book, maybe the title and some other ways that people may be able to connect with your journey?
we wrote a book called Reframing Hope, and it tells the story of those couple of years where our journey toward foster care and through that process, and his leukemia diagnosis and treatment, and to the adoption of our kids. And it is available on Amazon, and I think like maybe barnesandnoble.com. But you can find it there. And I think it was a therapeutic thing for us to write after kind of that journey, that chapter changed to a new season. It was therapeutic type thing for us to write. But a friend of ours that we met while Travis was in the hospital, who was a doctor, who's a doctor in the hospital where he was at, that we had mutual friends with him, but we didn't know him. And one of my mutual friends from college brought him to visit us one day. And then he just started coming and visiting really often. The whole time Travis was in the hospital, and he's a great guy. His name's Alan Baggett. But he is the one that told us we needed to write that book, and then very kindly pushed us along down the road to getting that done. So that was his idea, and it wouldn't have happened without his encouragement. So
yeah, that can be found. It may be easier to go to benandtravis.com/books, and then there should be Amazon link, the Barnes and Noble link there. But either way, you can type in Reframing Hope and look for her really pretty face and my non-pretty face on the cover. So, and the kids, if you want to see the kids there on the cover too.
Are your kids there? Do you want them to say hi?
Yeah, you can bring them in.
Introduce them.
They're out here in the hallway, I think.
Being good. I mean, they've been pretty quiet. I'm impressed.
No. Oh no.
That
would not be the case. You would have known when they came in.
Yeah, they've got some other kids out there from the other office.
They're probably going to be mad that we brought them in here, but
can y'all come say hi?
It's Haley.
Hi. This is Joe, and this is Ariel. Mom. And we did a little interview with them, and they wanted to say hi.
Talked about you kiddos.
Yeah, we talked about y'all.
Yeah.
Did you know your parents are super cool?
Yeah.
Oh, good answer.
Don't forget that. Write that down.
This is Daniel, and this is Haley.
It's so nice to meet you guys.
Stand up here, buddy, so you
Daniel's 9 and I'm 10.
That's right.
Awesome.
And I
Those
think
are fun ages.
They have. They both had
For better or for worse.
the same for second
awesome.
grade.
Mama, can we be race?
Not today.
Is there anything you guys want to say about your family?
Do you want to say anything?
My mom's the greatest mom.
And
Dad's the greatest dad.
Oh,
Right.
aren't they sweet?
You guys are so sweet.
Oh,
I'll pay you that $20 later. I'm glad we've got it videoed. I'm going to remind you.
y'all get dessert tonight.
Get on camera.
Well, thank you guys for coming to say hey. I'm glad I got
thank
to
you.
meet you.
Nice to meet y'all.
Yeah.